How's it going, everyone? In this video I'm going to be showing you guys how to change the clutch on the Honda Grom. So let's get started. So first things you got to do here is you got to remove the exhaust, pull this bottom half off, and then you got to remove the rear sets. I have some stunt rear sets on here, but it'd be the same process for the stock ones. Just remove the exhaust. You're going to take these bolts off and this clamp off. And then you got this 19mm nut, and on the stock one it'd be a 12mm nut here, or bolt. But on this one I have an Allen key one. And when you take these two off, you can just slide the rear set out, and then it'll get you enough room to get the bolts for the cover off. So let me do that now, and I'll show you guys the next step. Okay, with the bolts removed, you should be able to just pull the rear sets right out, and then slide it out of the way. Then the next thing you got to do is drain the oil. Get a 17mm and pull the drain plug out. Once you take the oil out, you can take the side cover off. You have 10 8mm bolts all the way around the cover. Just take the 8 bolts or the 10 bolts out, and then you can slide the cable out and pull the whole cover off. All right, with the bolts out, you got to remove the dipstick, and you can just wiggle the cover and you can pull it right off. Just set this aside for now. And now we're gonna work on removing the clutch. So to pull the clutch off, you gotta take the oil spinner off. You got these 3 10mm bolts you gotta take off. And you can also take off these 2 10mm bolts that hold this tray for the clutch, and take this off. So take these off, and then I'll show you the next step. All right, so with the bolts removed, you're gonna need a special socket that removes the oil spinner nut, and you just use this socket with an impact and take it right off, and the oil spinners just slide right out. All right, so with the nut loose, you can just slide the oil spinner out of the way. And then the next step is you can either just take these 3mm bolts or 10mm bolts out, or if this bearing is nice and easy, sometimes they just fall right off. You can just take the bearing out, and then there's a special nut in there that I'm gonna show you guys. You gotta take that out to remove the whole clutch. All right, well, with the bolts loosened, you can just slide this plate out. You're gonna be careful because the springs might wanna fall out. I like to just put everything in here. And then now you have another one of these special nuts. You got to remove this nut here, and you can slide the whole clutch off. Let me loosen it, and I'll show you guys taking it off. All right, so I loosened the nut. You just take this out, and then now you can slide the whole entire clutch out. Sometimes it might not slide out. You got to wiggle it a little bit. Or you might have to just take it apart and pull it out part by part. But doesn't matter. You just got to keep it in order once you put it back. So let me take it off, and I'll show you guys how to put it back together. All right. So with the clutch removed, you can start putting it back together now. You have the basket and the plate, pressure plates. This is very important here. So you have to pay attention when you put it back together. You have that dot right there, and then you have a dot on this cover right here. You got to make sure that you line those dots up. The dots have to be lined up for this to sit in there correctly. You can put it other ways and it will sit down, but the right way is to line those marks up. So now you have to get your new pressure plates. I'm using brand new from Honda. This is another trick that I like to do. I like to soak the discs overnight in oil. That way it's not dry once you put it in the bike. So I'm gonna open this bag up, and we'll start lining the discs up in here. Make sure the dots are lined up, and then slide them into the basket. And I'll show you guys once I have it ready to go. All right, so now that I have the discs in place installed, what I like to do is I like to put this with the springs right on here. I don't tighten it, but I just put it on here so that way it holds the bottom section with the top section, so that when you slide it on the basket, everything is in one piece. You can do it other ways, but sometimes it might get caught and this won't close all the way, and then your clutch isn't gonna work properly either. So I'm gonna put those bolts on with the springs, and I'll show you guys how to slide the clutch together and put it back on. All right, before I put the cover on here, or the plate, I don't know the name of that thing, but the thing that holds the springs on, I was gonna show you guys, I have upgraded clutch springs. It's hard for you to see that. I don't know if it's gonna focus, but these are the koso, I don't know how to pronounce it, 60% stiffer springs. I do a lot of wheelies with the grom, so these definitely do a lot. They help with grabbing and not spinning the clutch and burning it out really fast like the OEM springs. So this is a really good investment. I'd say get these for sure. All right, so with the springs and the bolts installed, I don't tighten it down all the way, but you can see that it's all closed and everything's sitting flush. So now you want to line the discs up and make sure you can slide it down into the basket like that, and pull this back out and install the basket. Then you need the big washer that goes in here, and then now you can slide this in. Before you do all that, you can't forget that tray. You got to slide it in with the basket, or else you're never going to be able to get it on. So let me do all that now, and I'll show you guys just putting everything back together. All right, so with everything back on, now you can put this nut back on in here and tighten everything down. Once that's tight, you can tighten these 3 bolts. If you have a modified one, you can tighten the 6 bolts, and then slide the oil spinner back on and tighten that up, and put the bolts back for the covers on. So I'll show you guys once it's all back together. All right, so we got everything back on and tightened up. These 3 bolts, the 2 bolts for the bottom tray, these bolts for the clutch springs all tightened up. And now we're ready to put the clutch cover back on. I have a new gasket I'm gonna put on here. So I'm gonna put that on, put the cover on, and then we got all those 10mm or 8mm bolts. We got 10 bolts to put around on the cover. So let me show you that. All right, so with all the bolts back on here on the cover, we can go ahead and tighten all the bolts all around the cover. Once you're done tightening all the bolts, you can put the last one and put the clutch cable on. And it's basically ready to go. Now you just gotta put the rear sets back on and the exhaust, put some oil in there, and the clutch is done. So let me put the rear sets on, the exhaust, put oil on it, and I'll start it up so you guys can see it. All right, so now that we put everything back on, tighten the rear sets, the exhaust, put oil back in the motor, we can go ahead and start it. Make sure nothing sounds weird when we start it. Everything checks out. Now we can probably play with the adjustment on the clutch lever here. Mine feels a little bit tight, so I might have to loosen that lever and give it a little more play. And that's about it. So thank you guys for watching. If you like the channel and like the videos, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up if you can. Thank you.